from writer-director Ryan Johnson.
The Holy Grail, a perfectly impossible crime.
Wake Up Dead Man has critics singing its praises.
God help me. Anything else?
It's a deliciously entertaining mystery.
That's nice.
It's certified fresh.
It's a miracle.
Okay, you're freaking me out now.
It's the best Knives Out movie yet.
This case is solvable, right?
Oh, you'll see. It's fun.
Wake Up Dead Man, a Knives Out mystery starring Daniel Craig. Now playing on Netflix.
Shopify's point of sale system helps you sell at every stage of your business. Need a fast and secure way to take payments in person? We've got you covered. How about card readers you can rely on anywhere you sell?
Thanks. Have a good one.
Yep, that too. Want one place to manage all your online and in-person sales? That's kind of our thing. Wherever you sell, businesses that grow with Shopify. Sign up for your $1 a month trial at shopify.com/Spotify. Shopify.com/Spotify.
When I wake up, well, I know I'm gonna be the man who wakes up next to you. When I go out, yeah, I know I'm gonna be the man who goes along with you. If I get drunk.
What's up, Sooner Nation? Welcome back to the podcast. We got some hype. Hope you're here for that. We've got some context, why things are happening, and not just what happened, but why. So you're in the right place. This episode, it's about separating noise from substance, all right? It's the kind of nights that look good on the scoreboard and the ones that actually tell you something about where Oklahoma football, basketball, the Thunder, where they're all heading. So we got 3 segments in this podcast episode. Each one's focused on a different moment that says more than just the headline ever could. So we got Poise under pressure. We got identity taking shape. We've got performances that quietly signal some real progress. Just so you'll know, first segment's going to be all about football. John Mateer, I got to get to that. Then we're switching to basketball. That's that time of the year. So before we jump into any of this, I need to ask you to do me a favor. First of all, I want to tell you I appreciate you. And then make sure you do the like, make sure you subscribe. Wherever you listen to the podcast, make sure you're there and following us. It's the easiest way to support what we do. And it helps us keep building our brand for Sooner fans who want more than just, surface level takes. And so let's jump into this, okay? Because I teased this conversation on Sunday because I really wanted to get into this on Sunday because it was more buzzing then than what it is now. But then Kobe McKenzie kind of threw a monkey wrench in that with his commitment, or I guess announcement to go into the transfer portal. But one of those moments where college football, the NFL draft, the NIL, and real career math all intersect. That's where John Mateer is, okay? That's the discussion, that the discussion stops being emotional and it starts being a little bit uncomfortable, okay? And there's a point in every college quarterback's career where the conversation shifts, okay? It stops being about the next opponent. It stops being about the next season. It stops being about whether you can play on Sundays. And it becomes about not is the NFL possible, but is this the right moment to go? And that's why I think this is a hot button topic, because there's a lot of people in the college football world. Had a conversation just today with a guy I know in Georgia who was like, what are they going to do about quarterback next year? You can't go back to John Mateer. Well, absolutely you can go back to John Mateer, because if Oklahoma doesn't want him, guess what? The NFL does. And there's a lot of Sooner Nation that doesn't even believe that he's an NFL quality or NFL caliber quarterback. I think we're all wrong about that, if that's where we stand. And John Mateer is on the precipice of having to make a decision of what he's going to do. Is he going to enter the NFL draft? Not because he's dominated college football, not because he's flawless, and not because he's universally viewed as a future franchise quarterback. The conversation that we're having, the conversation that John Mateer is having with his people, it exists for a much more complicated reason. So the NFL draft is not just about who you are, it's also about who else is available. And right now, John Mateer finds himself in a fascinating crossroads that has less to do with about arm strength and accuracy and more to do with timing, scarcity, and draft economics. So no, we're not talking about hype with John Mateer. We're talking about reality. And let's start with the part that we as fans, we either overstate or we dismiss entirely. And that's NFL buzz. Yeah, NFL evaluators, they know who John Mateer is. Yep, he has appeared on draft boards. And even analysts like Mel Kiper Jr., they've mentioned him among the quarterbacks to watch in the 2026 draft cycle. Even the exact ranking gets exaggerated online, and that matters a little bit. I think Mel Kiper Jr. has him as the fourth highest rated quarterback in the 2026 draft. And quarterbacks don't end up accidentally in those conversations. You don't just trip and fall into draft projections. Mateer has enough athleticism, he has enough poise, and he has enough production in high-profile environments for scouts to take him seriously. Don't forget, he was one of the top passers in 2024 in all of college football. So he's not anonymous. He's not a system-only quarterback. He's a legitimate evaluation. But here's where we as Sooner Nation, here's where we get tripped up a little bit. Because legitimate doesn't mean certain. Mateer's profile is best described as intriguing but unfinished. He can escape pressure. He can extend plays. He can throw accurately on the move. Those are traits that the NFL team values more than ever. But he also hesitates at times. His processing isn't always consistent. There are stretches where the offense bogs down because of anticipation, not arm talent. The anticipation hasn't caught up with him yet. And that combination of traits plus inconsistency is exactly why timing matters so much for him. Because quarterbacks like Mateer, they don't rise or fall solely on tape. They rise or fall based on the environment that they enter. Which brings us to the most important variable in this entire discussion. Let's talk about the 2026 quarterback draft class. All right, here's another part that we often miss out as a fan base. NFL teams don't draft quarterbacks in a vacuum. They draft against scarcity. When a draft class lacks obvious franchise passers, the value of quarterbacks who might normally be considered second tier, it rises dramatically. Traits get emphasized, upside gets prioritized, developmental timelines get stretched. So in other words, someone always gets drafted. And if Mateer continues on a steady upward trajectory, not spectacular, just steady, he could benefit enormously from being a part of a class where teams are searching for answers rather than choosing between stars. This is how some quarterbacks become late first-round draft picks. This is how early day two careers get launched. Not because the player suddenly becomes elite, but because the environment makes him necessary. That's not theory. That is history. Now, here's the uncomfortable flip side to all of this. The 2027 quarterback class is already being whispered about as deeper, stronger, and more talented than 2026. Multiple scouting outlets have early projections that include higher ceilings, cleaner mechanics, stronger arms, and more refined passers than what this current 2026 class is expected to offer. And draft projections, they have a funny habit, right? That they miss on individuals, but they're usually directionally correct. And if that holds, the calculus for Mateer changes dramatically. Because in a stronger class, being, quote, interesting, it's not enough. In a deeper class, quarterbacks without elite arm talent or flawless processing get pushed down on boards. Developmental prospects become afterthoughts. Teams stop reaching. Waiting an extra year only helps you if you clearly separate yourself. And that's the gamble. But leaving too early, that's just as dangerous. everybody knows this. John Mateer is not a finished product. He still benefits enormously from college reps, especially in the SEC. From seeing disguised coverages, from learning how to win from the pocket instead of relying on his escapability, from mastering patience when the first read isn't there. And Oklahoma offers something that many programs don't: visibility with forgiveness. What I mean by that is this: NFL scouts, they already watch Oklahoma quarterbacks closely. Mateer doesn't need to prove that he belongs on their radar because he's already on their radar. What he needs is refinement, and refinement happens best where mistakes don't end careers. In the NFL, one bad preseason can erase a quarterback. In college, growth is allowed. And that matters more than what we may realize as fans. And then there's the factor that no one likes to say out loud: money. Late round NFL quarterbacks, they don't make more than established college starters with strong NIL backing. Undrafted free agents absolutely don't. So for Mateer, staying another year, it's not about football, it's about leverage. It's about choosing when to enter the league instead of being rushed into the league. That's not selfish, that's smart. The modern quarterback has options. Mateer doesn't need to sprint toward a league that churns through backups at an alarming rate. He can wait until the environment favors him, which brings us to the real question here. It's not, can John Mateer go to the NFL? He can. The real question is whether he can go on his own terms. Right now, the stars are quietly aligning in a way that could make 2026 a legitimate window of opportunity. Not a guarantee, a window. One that rewards competence, durability, and upward trajectory more than it does dominance. But windows, they close quickly. If Mateer stagnates, the window shuts. If he regresses, the window disappears. And if the 2027 class lives up to its billing, the competition is going to stiffen overnight. So this isn't about chasing hype. It's about understanding draft economics. Sooner fans, we don't get to decide Mateer's future. He decides that. But we should also understand this much: his development matters more than his numbers. His command matters more than his highlights. His timing matters more than his raw talent. Quarterbacks with his profile don't fail because they lack ability. They fail because they miss their moment. And if John Mateer takes another step forward, not a leap, just a step, the NFL door won't just open, it'll wait. And in today's college football landscape, that's the most powerful position that a quarterback can be in. Let's talk Oklahoma City Thunder, because there was a moment late in the fourth quarter Monday night when the Paycom Center got just a little bit quieter than usual. Not silent, not nervous, but attentive. Memphis had trimmed what once looked like a comfortable Oklahoma City lead down to single digits. The kind of momentum that in past seasons might have invited rushed shots, forced hero ball, or that barely perceptible tightening that tells you a team feels the weight of the moment that they're in. And that feeling lingered for about 2 possessions. And then the Thunder did what elite basketball teams do. They got to stop. They ran clean offense. They generated the right shot. And just like that, the margin snapped back into place. Not with drama, not with theatrics, but with control. And by the final buzzer, Oklahoma City had secured a 119-103 win over the Memphis Grizzlies. They'd improved on their already absolutely absurd record and quietly reinforced something that's becoming harder to deny by the week. This team doesn't just win games, they control them. And that distinction matters more than almost anything else in the NBA. Because this wasn't a blowout masquerading as competition. It wasn't a highlight-heavy night destined to dominate debate shows. It was something more revealing and, frankly, more dangerous for the rest of the league. It was a professional win. It was a mature win, an emotionally disciplined win against an opponent that tried and failed to knock Oklahoma City off their rhythm. Championship teams are rarely defined by their best nights. They're defined by how they handle the nights where things threaten to wobble. And that's why this game matters a little bit more than it typically would. You start with SGA, not because of the box score, but because of the tone. Finished with 31 points and 8 assists, numbers that somehow feel almost routine by now for him. But what stood out wasn't the scoring total, it was his restraint. He didn't hunt the game, he stewarded it. When Memphis made its push, there was no panic, no forced pull-up, no extra dribbles, no attempt to reassert dominance. You didn't see the, hey, it's my turn possession designed to quiet the crowd. Instead, Shea just let the offense breathe. He trusted his reads. He trusted the spacing. He trusted his teammates. And when it was time to put the game away, he did it surgically, like one possession at a time. The kind of leadership that you don't demand attention. Those moments, everyone around you, it commands belief from them. And you can feel it in the arena. When SGA has the ball late, there's an assumption, not a hope, but an assumption that things are going to just be okay. And that's not normal for a player his age. It's rare. And it's the foundation of everything Oklahoma City has become. It's what separates this Thunder team from promising young groups of the past. It's not talent. Plenty of young teams have had talent, but it's the growth. It's that the real growth and even the shared growth, because that is sustainable. That's sustainable growth. Jalen Williams, oh my gosh, you saw his dunk, right? This dude continues to evolve from complimentary scorer into something far more important. I mean, he is a true co-pilot to this ship. He punishes mismatches without forcing the issue. He makes extra passes instinctively. He defends multiple positions without losing engagement offensively. He doesn't need plays called for him in order for him to matter. He understands where influence lives in winning basketball environments. That's playoff basketball DNA. And it shows up in subtle ways. The timing of a cut, the decision to swing instead of shoot, the ability to absorb physical defense without disappearing. That's not potential anymore. That's reliability is what that is. And then you look at the bench. Off the bench, Oklahoma City continues to demonstrate something even harder to build than star power itself. That's trust. This isn't depth for the sake of bodies. This is depth built on role clarity. When players check in, possessions don't get hijacked. The pace of the game doesn't change, and no one presses in order to try to justify their minutes. This is what you're seeing in real time, is culture revealing itself. That's coaching translating into habits. And that's why the Thunder, they don't flinch. And they didn't flinch when Memphis made things uncomfortable late. Now let's talk about defense, because this is where Oklahoma City has quietly separated itself. Memphis turned the ball over 23 times, and we've talked about Oklahoma's propensity to force turnovers. We see these numbers and we know 23 turnovers, not an accident. And it's not just about Memphis being sloppy. Oklahoma City forces mistakes because the Thunder defend with intention. They've got active hands, but they don't gamble. Rotations are sharp, but they don't overhelp. There's a clear understanding of when to apply pressure and when to contain. So this isn't about chaotic defense fueled by youth and athleticism. This is organized, connected, and repeatable. That's the difference between a defense that looks good in February and one that travels into the playoffs, May and June. Even during the run that the Grizzlies made, the Thunder didn't break down structurally. The Grizzlies they made tough shots. Those are the kind of shots that you can live with defensively, because they didn't feast on blown coverages or miscommunications. They just knocked down contested shots. And when Oklahoma City needed stops late, guess what happened? They got them. They got them cleanly. No fouling, no scrambling, no panic, just execution. Those are championship habits. Now, of course, context matters, and you have to address this. Memphis was shorthanded. They're still searching for consistency. They're dealing with injuries, and they have identity questions. But elite teams, they don't play down to context. They don't apologize for who's missing on the other side. They don't let sympathy seep into execution. They don't allow should-win games to turn into coin flips. What the Thunder did on Monday night is they showed up. They did their job, and then they moved on to a bigger, more anticipatory type game right now, tonight, while I'm recording, against San Antonio. And that's exactly what Oklahoma City does. And they do it without expending emotional energy that they're going to need later. There was no chest thumping, no overreaction, no post-game declarations, just business handled correctly. And again, that's not youthful exuberance anymore. That's professional expectation. And I think this is where the bigger picture comes into focus. At some point, the conversation around the Thunder has to evolve. Not just from, is this team for real? Because that ship has sailed. The real question is how high this ceiling actually is. Because this team isn't winning on hot shooting nights alone. They're winning because their margins are clean. They generate good shots. They force turnovers. They protect the ball. They defend without fouling. They correct mistakes quickly. And perhaps most importantly, when adversity shows up, even briefly, it's met with composure instead of chaos. So Monday night against Memphis, it wasn't the loudest evidence of Oklahoma City's rise. It was something even better than that. It was a quiet confirmation. It was proof that this group understands who it is and who they are as a team that doesn't blink. That's not just impressive. Guys, that's a problem for the rest of this league.
Okay, only 10 more presents to wrap. You're almost at the finish line. But first... there, the last one. Enjoy a Coca-Cola for a pause that refreshes.
Well, the end of the college football season means we're going to take some transitions here with the Sooner Nation podcast. We're still going to talk about football. We're always going to talk about football. Football is our bread and butter. I've always said football pays the bills, but we do have to turn our conversation more towards spring sports, which good news is a lot of us are softball fans, and we're just over a month away from the softball season. So as we turn the page into 2026, we're going to start doing January, some previews for the 2026 softball season. Also, we got to jump into basketball because I think things are about to get really interesting on the basketball front. And you look at what happened Monday night with this Oklahoma basketball team. You know, there are blowouts and then there are statements. And Monday night at the Lloyd Noble Center, that was very clearly the latter of the two. Oklahoma's 107-54 dismantling of Stetson wasn't memorable because of the opponent, and it wasn't even memorable because of the margin. Although you look at a 53-point win, it's always going to catch your eye. What mattered was how the Sooners went about their business because of the clarity, because of the intent, because of the quiet sense that this wasn't a team chasing a good night. It was a team executing a plan that it actually believes in. And those are two very different things. So we've all seen empty calorie blowouts before. Games where shots fall early, confidence snowballs, and the score gets out of hand without really telling you anything about who a team is. This wasn't that. This wasn't Oklahoma stumbling into a historical shooting night, although it was. This was Oklahoma earning a historical shooting night. And as the calendar turns towards January and towards conference play, that distinction matters far more than the final score. So let's start with the obvious number here because it's impossible to ignore. Oklahoma shot nearly 68% from the field. That is the best single game shooting performance in program history. That jumps off the stat sheet immediately. It's the kind of number that makes national tickers and social media graphics. But here's the important part here. The shots didn't go in because it was a lucky night. They went in because the Sooners were taking the right type of shots. This game wasn't about difficult makes or bailouts late in the clock. Oklahoma wasn't leaning on hero ball. There were no possessions where you thought, well, that's just not sustainable. And instead, this was advantaged basketball. There were paint touches, there were kickouts, there were baseline cuts, swing passes that forced defensive rotations to stretch just a half a second too late. That's why the shooting percentage matters. Not because it was high, but because it was honest. This offense had structure. The spacing made sense. The ball moved with purpose. And most importantly, players trusted that the next action would be better than the first. That kind of trust doesn't show up overnight. And it doesn't come from one hot half of basketball. It comes from repetition and buy-in. Now remember, this is a team that's gelling together. And now we're seeing growth from them. So one of the biggest questions surrounding this Oklahoma basketball team has been balance. Remember what we just talked about. A lot of new faces. So we're not asking just who can score, but how scoring responsibilities are shared. Against Stetson, that question didn't just get answered. I think it got reframed. Darian Reed had a career night. Xavier Brown continued his strong stretch of play. Mohamed Awagi controlled the paint. Nigel Pack orchestrated without forcing himself into the spotlight. Tay Davis, Cole Attack. Others, they chipped in seamlessly. In all, you got 6 players in double figures. That's not just a fun stat. That's a winning sign for Oklahoma and a warning sign for future opponents. Because this version of Oklahoma basketball, it doesn't need to be one great player every night. It needs to be multiple players having solid nights, being connected and aware. And that's a far more dangerous formula, especially in conference play where scouting reports are thorough and adjustments come fast. And to me, what stood out wasn't just who scored, but how naturally the offense shifted depending on what Stetson tried to take away from them. Right? So when the paint was crowded, Oklahoma spaced the floor and punished it. When defenders overplayed the perimeter, the Sooners attacked downhill. When help came early, cutters were rewarded. That adaptability has not always been a given under Porter Moser. On Monday night it was, and it was unmistakable. But for all of the offensive fireworks, the foundation of this performance was defense. Oklahoma dictated the game with physicality, with positioning, and with discipline. Stetson struggled. They struggled to initiate offense. They struggled to get second chances. They struggled to find any rhythm whatsoever. And as we said before the game, the Sooners won the rebounding battle decisively. They took away easy looks at the rim. And when Stetson settled for perimeter shots, which is what they're supposed to do because Stetson's a three-point shooting team, Oklahoma was able to live with those results. That is mature defense. That is understanding the math. That is understanding that great defense doesn't always look dramatic. Sometimes it just quietly strangles momentum away from your opponent. But there's an old rule in basketball that defense fuels offense, and you could feel that chain reaction pretty much all night long. Stops led to early offense. Early offense led to confidence. Confidence led to cleaner passing. Cleaner passing led to elite shot quality. Not coincidence, not even a little bit. That is, we use the word identity a lot with the football team. Now we're going to transfer it over to basketball because that's identity beginning to solidify. I think another subtle but important takeaway from this game was depth, like real depth, not theoretical depth, but not the type of depth that says, yeah, we think these guys could help. We're talking about actual functional depth that didn't disrupt flow. Minutes were spread out. Roles were clear. Nobody looked rushed or desperate to prove that they deserved their limited opportunities, just like we talked about with the Oklahoma City Thunder in the previous segment. Freshman Kai Rogers, he expanded his role a little bit more. And again, that matters. A young guy who plays with energy. He rebounded. He finished around the rim. And he didn't force himself into situations that he wasn't ready for. Those contributions, they don't swing games in December, but they're absolutely things that will matter in February when foul trouble, when fatigue and the physicality test begins to stretch your rotations. Even like, you look at Dayton Forsythe out with injury, and you hate that, right? But it revealed something important. Oklahoma didn't flinch. Without Forsythe, the structure still held up. The system absorbed his absence without unraveling. And that's the difference between a team and a collection of players. This isn't just a collection of guys anymore. And I think we should talk about the Lloyd Noble Center because this is a conversation that matters. I mean, Oklahoma is a football school, right? But you've got a basketball team that's unbeaten at home. And nights like this explain why. The limited crowd, look at the videos, needs to be better, but they fed off of early dominance. And what impressed me was what didn't happen. There was no second half drift. There was no easing off because the margin was comfortable. The standard didn't change from the opening tip to the final buzzer, and the crowd stayed with them through that. You know this, in previous seasons, that's not always been the case. I mean, we've seen big leads sometimes came with loose possessions and bad habits. But against Stetson, there really wasn't any of that. And that's how you build a home court edge, not just with noise, but with consistency with the product that you're putting on the court. And just like we talked about with the Thunder, same principle applies with the Sooners. Perspective matters. No one is mistaking Stetson for an SEC opponent. I'm not saying that. This game won't define Oklahoma's season, and it shouldn't. The Sooners are absolutely going to face defenses that are longer, more physical, and far more prepared than what they saw on Monday night with Stetson. But at the same point, dismissing this performance as a meaningless game, I think that would be lazy. Because what matters at this part of the season is trajectory. Oklahoma has now won 6 of its last 7 games. The offense process, I guess the offense is beginning to process and look more cleaner. Defensive attention, it's sharpened. The rotation is stabilizing. The Sooners aren't just winning, they're learning how to win without chaos. And there's something else that matters as much as any line on your NCAA tournament resume. The best non-conference games, they're not about survival. They're about preparation. They're about stress testing habits under low pressure so they hold up when the pressure ramps up. And against Stetson on Monday night, Oklahoma passed that test emphatically. The Sooners showed that they can start fast. They showed that they can share the ball. They showed that they can defend without fouling. They can control the glass. They can maintain focus with a large lead. They got production from multiple lineup combinations. Those are all tests. Those are all things you want stressed and thoroughly examined before Ole Miss comes to start conference play. Because those are traits that translate when that margin for error begins to disappear. So Monday night wasn't about running up the score. It was about confirmation. Confirmation that Oklahoma's recent progress isn't a mirage. That this team understands who it wants to be and that the foundation is finally firm enough to support real expectations. The Sooners didn't just beat Stetson by 53 points. They showed that they're done searching for their identity, and that realizing who they are may end up being the most important win of the season. So that's going to do it for this episode of the Sooner Nation podcast. Thanks for hanging out with us. Thanks for being with us. If there's a common thread throughout everything we talked about today, it's this: real progress. It's not always loud. Sometimes it shows up in poise, in preparation, and in teams learning how to handle moments instead of being defined by them. That's where Oklahoma is right now. That's where the Thunder are right now. Not finished, but moving in the right direction. Listen, if you enjoyed the episode, please take a second to like, subscribe, share with another Sooner fan. That support really does make a difference to us, and it helps the community at heartland-sports.com, our community on Facebook. It helps us to continue to grow and to be a family. Most importantly, man, just from my wife and I to you and your family, I want to wish everyone that listens a very Merry Christmas. Enjoy the time, appreciate those moments, and we're going to be back, and we're going to break it all down for you again. But until then, Merry Christmas.